The house on Blackwood Lane did not loom. It crouched. It sat in the tall, yellowing grass, like a dying animal waiting for the scavengers to arrive. I remember the way the air felt as I stepped onto the porch, thick, like trying to breathe through a wet woolen blanket. It was mid-October, and the sun was a bruised purple smear against the horizon, offering light but no warmth. I hadn't come for the inheritance or the history. I had come because the silence in my own life had become louder than any scream, and my great-uncle's estate offered a different kind of quiet. Or so I thought. For many years, the heart of an old house beats in rhythm with its inhabitants. When they die, the house is supposed to stop. But as I turned the heavy iron key in the lock, the click echoed through the foyer with a wet, organic thud, as if I had just tripped a valve in a massive, dormant lung. The smell hit me instantly, not the sharp tang of rot, but the heavy, sweet scent of overripe lilies and old parchment. It was a smell that belonged to the dead, who refused to be forgotten. I dropped my suitcase in the hallway. The floorboards groaned, a long, drawn-out sound that followed my footsteps like a shadow. I stood there for a long time, watching the dust motes dance in the beam of my flashlight. They didn't drift aimlessly. They seemed to swirl in deliberate patterns, tracing the outlines of people who weren't there. I told myself it was the draft. I told myself a lot of things that first night. Sleep did not come easily. I lay in the master bedroom on the second floor, listening to the house settle. There is a specific language to old wood, the pops, the cracks, the sighs. But about 3 in the morning, the language changed. It became rhythmic. From somewhere deep within the walls, perhaps behind the heavy oak wainscoting, came a sound like a finger tapping. Tap, 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 tap. It was irregular, impatient. It sounded like someone trying to remember a heartbeat. I sat up, the sweat cold on my neck. The room was freezing, my breath blooming in the dark like ghost flowers. I reached for the lamp, but the switch clicked uselessly. The darkness in that room wasn't just an absence of light, it was a weight. It felt as though the corners of the room were stretching, pulling the walls further away until I was floating in a void. "Is someone there?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, brittle. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was a predatory silence, the kind that holds its breath while it watches you through a keyhole. Then, from the hallway, came the sound of a heavy weight being dragged across the carpet. Shh, thump, shh, thump. I forced myself out of bed. My legs felt like lead. But the primal urge to know what was hunting me overcame the paralysis of fear. I opened the bedroom door. The hallway was a long, dark throat. At the far end, near the stairs that led to the attic, stood a tall, narrow mirror. In the faint moonlight filtering through the clerestory windows, I saw a reflection. But it wasn't mine. It was a figure, shrouded in what looked like tattered funeral lace, its face a gray blur of sunken features. It wasn't moving. It was just existing there, a stain on the reality of the corridor. I blinked, and it was gone. But the dragging sound continued, now moving down the stairs toward the kitchen. I followed. I don't know why. Perhaps it's the same impulse that makes a man look over the edge of a cliff even when he knows he suffers from vertigo. I descended the stairs, my hand white-knuckled on the banister. The kitchen was bathed in a sickly green glow from the emergency light over the stove. There, on the linoleum floor, was a trail. It looked like water, but it was thicker, shimmering with an iridescent sheen like oil on a puddle. It led directly to the cellar door. The door was ajar. A sliver of absolute blackness peered out from the gap. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and pushed it open. The hinges didn't creak. They hissed. I descended the stone steps into the belly of the house. The air here was freezing, smelling of wet earth and ancient copper. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, hitting the far wall. There, stacked from floor to ceiling, were hundreds of jars. Glass jars sealed with wax. Some were filled with buttons, some with hair. But the ones in the center, the ones that seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light, were filled with something else. They were filled with teeth, thousands of them, small, white, and pointed. I felt a presence behind me, a coldness that made the hair on my arms stand up like wire. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. "You've come to count them," a voice whispered. It wasn't a human voice. It sounded like the rubbing of dry leaves or the rustle of a shroud. He always wanted someone to count them. I found my voice, though it felt like swallowing glass. "Who are you?" "I am the keeper of the things left behind," the voice replied. "The parts of ourselves we discard so we can pretend we are whole. The milk teeth, the locks of hair, the fingernails, the skin we shed in the night. Your uncle understood. He knew that nothing is ever truly gone. It just waits to be gathered." I slowly turned my head. There was no one there, only the shadow of the furnace cast against the stone wall. But the shadow was wrong. It had too many limbs. It was stretching, reaching toward the jars, its fingers elongated and needle-thin. Suddenly, the jars began to vibrate. The sound was like a million insects trapped in glass, a high-pitched, harmonic ringing that drilled into my skull. One jar near the edge tipped over. It hit the stone floor and shattered. The teeth didn't just scatter. They scurried. They moved like white beetles, clicking across the floor toward my boots. I scrambled back up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I slammed the cellar door and shoved the heavy kitchen table against it. The thumping from the other side started immediately. Not a frantic pounding, but a slow, deliberate rhythmic strike. Thump, thump, thump. I ran to the front door. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It wouldn't budge. The wood felt soft, almost fleshy under my hand. I looked down and saw that the doorframe was bleeding a thick, dark sap. The house wasn't letting me out. It was sealing itself. I retreated to the center of the foyer, spinning around as the walls began to sigh. The wallpaper was peeling back in long, wet strips, revealing not lath and plaster, but something that looked like pale, ribbed muscle. The house wasn't a structure of wood and stone anymore. It was a living thing, and I was in its stomach. I remembered my uncle's letters. He had written about the vessel of memory. I had thought he was being poetic, a senile old man lost in his books. But now I realized he was describing a biological clock, a machine built of grief and cast-off remains that required a heart to keep it beating. The dragging sound was back, now coming from the ceiling directly above me. I looked up. The chandelier was swaying, though there was no wind. The crystals tinkled like laughter. A dark spot began to form on the plaster of the ceiling, spreading rapidly like an ink blot. It was dripping. A single drop of that thick, iridescent fluid fell and landed on my forehead. It was searingly hot. I wiped it away, but my hand came back stained with something that smelled of the sea and the grave. The ceiling began to sag, the weight of whatever was above me becoming too much for the joists to bear. Everything has a price. The voice of the keeper echoed through the halls, sounding from every room at once. For the house to remember, it must be fed. For the past to live, the present must be consumed. I saw the front windows then. They weren't looking out onto the night anymore. They were covered in a thick, milky film, like the eyes of a cataract patient. Beyond the film, I could see shapes moving, huge, indistinct forms that drifted through the yellow grass of the yard. They weren't coming to save me. They were waiting for the house to finish its meal. I backed away into the library, tripping over a stack of books. As I fell, I saw a small, leather-bound diary on the floor. It was open to the final page. My uncle's handwriting was frantic, the ink smeared by tears or sweat. "It isn't the ghosts that kill you," the last line read. "It's the realization that you are one of them." I looked at my hands. In the dim light, they seemed translucent. I could see the bones beneath the skin, but the bones were changing. They were turning white and brittle, like the teeth in the jars. I tried to scream, but the only sound that came out was the dry rustle of dead leaves. The ceiling above me finally gave way. But it wasn't rubble that fell. It was a cascade of white lace and gray dust, a shroud that settled over me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. I struggled, but the more I moved, the tighter the fabric became. It smelled of overripe lilies. I lay there on the library floor, the darkness closing in. The thumping against the cellar door had stopped. The house was quiet now, a satisfied silence. Through the gaps in the lace, I saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was tall and narrow, its face a gray blur. It walked toward me with a slow, dragging gait. Shh, thump. Shh, thump. It reached down and picked up the diary. Then it turned and walked toward the hallway mirror. I watched as it stepped into the glass and vanished. I tried to sit up, but my limbs wouldn't obey. I felt heavy, yet hollow. I looked toward the cellar door. The kitchen table was gone. The door was wide open. From the darkness of the basement, a single white tooth skittered across the floor and stopped inches from my face. It was small, sharp, and familiar. It was a tooth I had lost when I was 6 years old. The fire in the hearth flickered one last time and went out. I am still here, in the corner of the library. I am waiting, I don't know for what. Perhaps for the next person to turn the key in the lock, perhaps for the wind to stop calling my name. The house is breathing again. I can feel the pulse in the floorboards. It is steady. It is hungry. And somewhere in the walls, the tapping has started once more. Tap, 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 tap. I wonder if they will find the jars first, or if they will find me. And I wonder, as the shadows stretch long and thin across the floor, if there is any difference between the two. The moonlight is fading now, and the yellow grass outside is beginning to moan. I close my eyes, but the house stays. It always stays.